So, I have two more. They're Halloweeny, and I think I'll do them back to back if you want to do your next one.
Certainly. So I have a book that you recommended to me called Zealot, The Life and Times of Jesus of Nazareth. So this is basically a slightly historical take. I would say it's a very historical take with some, how to say,
Hold on, just before you get to that review, I think we have one last call. Who is on the line there? Anyone? Thank you so much, calling in, Dragon. Charlie, go ahead.
So it's a historical look at the things that happened during this time, talking about basically what it would have looked like around this area, things that were actually happening during the time that Jesus was alive, and adding in what the biblical mythology would look like fitting in with that history. Some things that it will call out and just say, yeah, that's not how it would have happened at all. Others said that, yeah, this is what happened, at least like what the Bible tells us, instead of like fact checking or anything. So it's very hard to talk about this in any way other than just in general, because I don't know how to talk about it entirely as a history, since I'm not super well versed on it. That'd be more your lane. But the way I saw it, so we get to see like things that happened at the temples, hearing a little bit about the Zealots at the time, what that actually means, which is a group of people that I didn't even know about.
They don't really talk about them.
Yeah. They were basically like bandits and all that, and go out and very, very nationalistic group, refused anything to Rome. But it even talks about, for example, like they asked Jesus, like, what do you think? He says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, where it's not about like doing things for Rome. It's like you give him his coin and all that, but we are going to be doing what we're going to do. It was a very zealot response in a way, is the way it explained it.
I want to ask you three things.
Yeah, okay. Help me with this.
Okay, so the first one, we'll get it out of the way easy. Does it get it? Yeah. Okay.
Easiest question first.
We'll give it its yeah, and then we'll get to the... Do you think Jesus was a zealot? I mean, that's what the book is essentially saying. That's why there's a picture of Jesus with zealot on the cover. Like it's And this title, you didn't realize till you'd read it. This is already making like quite a bold claim, and
it's saying
this is a political statement almost already.
That he was entirely for the nation of Israel and all of that, and refusing Rome. I don't know if he went that far. I don't know if he thought that much ahead, because so it explains what Nazareth was like, and it is a really small town in the sticks with nothing going on. There's nothing to do there. You basically have a small field, and you're lucky to just survive.
Yeah.
We know, like, from his family that he's a builder. We don't know anything else that he did. He would have maybe gone to a nearby city, but it was pillaged. Rome destroyed it at one point, and so he might have helped, like, build it back up to an extent. I don't think he was necessarily educated enough to be a zealot. He might have just heard about the zealot cause and said, yes, I would agree with that. I don't know if he really thought that much ahead. Like things happening at the temple, he would say... So the big event that happened in his life and in the book is him going to the temple, overturning the money counters, all that, where people would have to exchange their money to be able to buy any of the things for the sacrifices, which, of course...
So that leads into question 2B. If not exactly a zealot, a criminal, right?
Yeah.
By the law of the land, you know?
Yeah, by Jewish law, he was absolutely a criminal there. Because turning the money... They would not accept money that was not Jewish money.
Exactly. And the Jews were under the obligation to do the pilgrimage and go there. Diaspora Jews had to go to the temple, so they had to turn over the money. It was actually a very important function of the religion and of the state.
How would you give a sacrifice then?
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't be able to pay for your sacrifice, which is also rule of religion.
I don't want to... certainly put people off by getting too much into the religious side of things and Christianity and everything. But one thing that I think is important is when they teach you this story in, Sunday school or whatever, it is just very much this one perspective of, oh yeah, these bad people were changing money, so Jesus came and flipped the tables, and that was a good thing.
Righteous anger.
Yeah, and it's like, well, hold on. They were serving a very important sort of socio-political purpose, and this guy no one's ever heard of just comes in and starts flipping tables over in the most important holy building that they have. Of course, they arrested him.
Yeah.
Of course.
So things like that. Talking about Herod the Great, who was originally the one known as King of the Jews, which was quite interesting.
I like Herod.
Well, we'll get into that. Well, we might not get into that, actually.
Herod gave them their temple.
That's true.
That temple that they obsessed with and wanted back, and they still have even the Wailing Wall to this day. But that temple was from Herod.
Also, all the people that were in charge of that temple were his men, for the most part. Or it might have been his son's men. I forget which one it would have been.
There's some other issues with the biblical tellings because they discuss King Herod, but then later when they talk about King Herod, they're actually talking about like Herod Antipas, who was maybe a tetrarch, a governor of one portion of the country after it had been divided by the Romans. Yeah. But the Bible story makes it seem like it's the same Herod from before, and there's other things going on.
Quirinius and all that. And it talks about, of course, what was it? The census and all that, and how that never would have happened that way.
Of course, that's not.
I
mean, even as a child, I was like, that seems like a weird way to do a census.
Traveling hundreds and hundreds of miles to wherever you're from,
to then go back home again the next day.
That was just because they wanted him to.
It's a prophecy fulfilling story,
or a prophecy that may or. I read that and I'm like, is that actually a prophecy? It didn't.
I don't know,
but.
I think it was to tie him in with the lineage from King David, maybe something like that. But before you finish your point, my third question: is this a good bedtime story?
Not for me, but
because I have in the past read this as a bedtime story to someone, and then peppered it with additional information from my university studies on Roman Judea, which I think is just delightful.
But there's a lot more that I just never knew about. That Jesus would have been basically a disciple of John the Baptist. That's where you get a lot of his views. Obviously, the Bible does what they can to make it seem like when John was writing about John the Baptist, made it seem like, oh, he's just this guy who's baptizing people. But baptizing people was the way that you would convert, basically.
Yes.
Right? It would not have made any sense for a Jew to convert at this time, to be baptized. It made no sense for Jews to be baptized.
Again, that's something that they don't really talk about, but yeah.
Yeah, things like that. So that was quite interesting. Also, James being Jesus' brother, never talked about in church.
They never talk about that either.
That was really, really interesting. And so him having like brothers and sisters, of course, like the Catholic Church would refuse that.
Of course.
But yeah, I remember actually as a kid though, James was one of my favorite books of the Bible, because he's just like, yeah, you're a terrible person if you do this. And he was very, very strict with a lot of it. You can see how different it is from Paul, which brings me to the final point that I wanted to make, is that they did not get along. Paul and James did not like each other. James called Paul to Rome, I guess, to basically say, stop what you're doing. You're making up all these stories, none of which are true.
You know my feelings on Paul. I'm not going to go into it here, but
I think that Paul converted just to make his own religion in a way. I think that he was persecuting, and it's like, oh, I have an idea. I can create my own religion around this and make people then follow me.
Elron Paulbert?
Yeah, basically. That's my conspiracy. It is a conspiracy about Paul, but I think it's kind of fair. Why would someone who's like going around killing all these people then be like, oh, I'm going to make up my own stories?
Yeah.
Unless he's just like, oh, you see how stupid this is? Do you see how stupid this is? I'm making up these stories. So he might have been just doing that too.
I think it's interesting because, we get to look at a lot of points that we don't see. You're laughing at me for two reasons. One is that three reasons. Number one, I realized I did not need the headset on because you're in the room with me, so I took it off.
And put it back.
Number two is that I then got the milk for the tea and had nowhere to put the milk. and was moving it all around. And number three is I then put the headset back on. It feels weird with it off. I'm gonna keep it on. So
So yes.
I love this book. For me, this was very important. I'd studied the stuff. I was able to pepper in extra information when I read it. I really got a lot out of it. It was interesting seeing what Jesus portrayed essentially as a criminal, and I think the book's making a big point.
To an extent, I don't think it's that blatant with it, but he's not saying like, "Oh, look how bad this guy is."
Mm.
It is. This is what it would be like.
This is what it was. Yeah.
But I like as well. So after the epilogue, that's page 216. We then go into like one page of acknowledgments. The notes are what 70 pages here with
Yeah.
the bibliography. That's another 30 to 40.
So 100 pages of notes and bibliography. But that's good. I mean, this is an
You
actual
can see,
scholar.
like, yeah, it is a scholar who he says this is exactly where I got all my information.
Yeah.
You know that this is a real work.
Yes.
It's not just like someone coming in and making up their own stories and all that. He says exactly where he gets it all from, and that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's something I really, really respected about it. And I mean, it's been a decade since I've read this book, but I've always kept it on the shelf.
Yeah.
I've always respected it. Okay.
So yeah, those are my books for the month.
What do we think we're going to read next?